university and you lived in a regional area while you were on that visa. So it's quite an attractive option because it can then lead to other pathways. It also is a very positive and opportunity for people in regional areas because it doesn't require you to seek an employment contract. You just have to extend that visa through evidence of residency. It is a requirement that you have lived in that regional area for the duration of your first visa and you've worked in your regional university qualifications as well will be looked at. So for example, if you're studying at the University of Newcastle but you're located in Sydney, you will not be eligible for this visa. You have to be living and working in a regional area and studying in a regional area for this to be an eligibility criteria. The second visa is open for applications from next year. So for those of you who are graduating at the end of this year or in future, you should be eligible for this visa moving forward, the extension visa. The TGV is available at the moment, but the extension component that I've just talked about with the regional benefits will be available from next year onwards. There's more information on our website as to when the nominations will be open for that extension visa. I suggest you have a look on there to check that date. So, as I mentioned, having an extension on that TGV visa may actually make you eligible for skilled migration. Because for any of you who have looked into skilled migration, there is actually a minimum experience level required when you apply under most occupation codes. So the way that our visas work, for those of you who don't know, if you're going to apply for a skilled migration program, you need to nominate yourself or your employer nominates you under an ANZCO code, so an occupation code. And again, our website is very useful to get more information about this. So when you apply under an ANZCO code, each occupation has a minimum experience level requirement, and that is on our website as well. You can actually go into our website, you can type occupation list and you can get a list of occupations, and then it will give you a breakdown of how many years experience you need to have to be eligible for that particular occupation, what your qualifications need to be, and any other requirements you need to have to meet that visa program. So, if you do the TGV and then you do the extension, you may possibly become eligible for skilled migration pathways. Now, as you all know, when you start here as a student in Australia, you are signing a declaration that you intend to study, and it's a temporary visa. Your intention is to study and then depart Australia and depart the country. There are pathways, though, that the department have created and the current government are well aware, that make it possible for people to stay in Australia. And regional areas is our major focus at the moment. So what I'm talking about next is the regional provisional visas. So these are the visas that are open to people living in regional areas. And as I mentioned, Newcastle is now considered a regional area. So you are now eligible if you live in Newcastle and you study in Newcastle and you want to stay in Newcastle, you are actually now eligible for these visas. If you wish to move to Lismore, or you wish to move to Byron Bay and go surfing, you might want to move to a farm and live the farm life and work in a town, a much smaller town, you're also eligible. You will not be eligible if you move to Sydney. You will not be eligible if you move to Melbourne or Brisbane either. You need to be very aware of what regional is defined as these days. Perth is actually now included, Adelaide is now included, the Gold Coast is now included, but I would suggest that if you're already living in the Hunter, working in the Hunter, studying in the Hunter, you're most likely to want to stay in the Hunter. So personal choice, not for me to comment on, but there are two pathways that exist under this visa. Now, this visa was introduced in November 2019. Now, there is actually a permanent pathway that is attached to this program, which I will touch on as well. So, this can be a pathway of permanent residency for some people. There is a 494 visa, which is an employer-sponsored regional visa. And under this visa, you must get sponsorship from an employer. So, an employer would have to essentially sponsor you through the immigration program and provide you with a work contract and a commitment to provide you with work for up to 5 years full time. Okay? For the 491 visa is a state or territory sponsorship or a family sponsorship visa. So what this means is you still need to meet the occupation requirements. Now, to meet the occupation requirements, there is an occupation list that exists for regional areas, and it is much longer than the occupation list that you're eligible for if you lived in an urban area. So now in Newcastle, you are actually eligible to apply for a much longer list of occupations to be sponsored under this visa program. So if you've got family living in the Hunter or in regional Australia who are willing to sponsor you to stay here, they are eligible to do so. You do need to meet one of the occupation requirements and the visa requirements such as English, character checks, health checks, safety checks, all the other things that we normally need to meet under visa programs is still a requirement, but your family can also sponsor you. A state or territory government can also sponsor you. And the way the sponsorship works under a state or territory government, I'll touch on in a little bit as well. So, you've decided to approach an employer, they're very happy to sponsor you, you meet the occupation requirements. The employer-sponsored stream would start off with the employer applying to be a sponsor, becoming approved, and then nominating you for that visa. It's much more broader than that. I'm simplifying it very much here because obviously I'm very mindful of time. But basically, if the person who is sponsoring you is already a sponsored, approved sponsor, they wouldn't have to go through that again. For example, if the university were to sponsor you for an academic position, or if one of the hospitals were to sponsor you for a medical position, nursing position, etc., they're already approved, they don't need to reapply, but they do need to go through the nomination process. If a small business was interested in nominating you, they would possibly have to start from scratch. The 491 pathway, what you were required to do in this instance is actually to log on to our website, and all you need to do is type in 491 visa and all the information comes up in the search function. You need to actually log in and create an application, and based on your answers and based on the evidence you provide, you're allocated points. Once you've allocated a certain amount of points, a minimum of 65, you can submit an expression of interest, and you can actually select which state you're interested in living in. The state government can then have a look through the list of applicants and select people that would be suitable in regional areas that they know there's a shortage of your skill set or occupation in. So it's a little bit like the independent program, skilled program. However, the benefit of this is that the list of occupations is much more substantial than the independent visa, which I'm not going to talk about today. But this is basically a really interesting visa, because one of the other things that it actually does is it opens you up to permanent residency under the 191 visa, which I'm not going to talk about today specifically. It's not open for nominations yet. Because this visa was only introduced last year, the 191 will become a visa that is being activated in 2022, in November. But basically, if you apply for the 491 or the 494, you do a 3-year minimum on those visas and you continue to live in a regional area, you can actually become eligible for permanent residency. Okay, so that's actually one of the things that's of significant benefit under this visa, is that you can actually navigate a pathway to permanent residency. Now, I've listed here a number of other regional visa pathways that are open to you all in the room if you are residents of the Hunter. It is a significant list, and it's by no means exhaustive, but it's just to give you an indication of what some of the options are. So the skilled independent and the skilled nominated visas, the 189 and the 190, they are traditionally the visas that people would attempt to come through for permanent residency, but the list of occupations is pretty small and niche. Under the regional program, the list is much longer, so the job opportunities and options are far more extensive, generally speaking. So the next visa I'm going to talk about is a very exciting initiative, and I think that those of you who are in the STEM field are going to find this one really exciting. The Global Talent Visa is basically a response to the Australian government's attempt and real campaign, I guess you can say, to attract the most qualified, best and brightest individuals to create a more prosperous nation. We're looking at 5,000 places in this visa program, and it is a permanent visa. This is a permanent visa, and it is a really exciting opportunity for some of you in this room, I think, who may actually be eligible for this visa. So what we're trying to do is bring in talented individuals who are working across 7 key industries, or are graduates of these industries, or soon to be graduates of these industries. So if you are working or studying in an industry or a sector that is closely aligned with any of these 7 key sectors, AgTech, MedTech, cybersecurity, quantum information, advanced digital data science and ICT, space and advanced manufacturing, energy and mining resources, or FinTech. And I do realise FinTech doesn't necessarily fit into the STEM broader definition, but I am using STEM as a shorthand because I can't say these 7 sectors back to back every single time. You will be eligible for a permanent residency visa. Now I'm going to break down what the requirements are further for you. So, there is a high income threshold, and there is a requirement to be internationally recognised and exceptionally talented. And what that basically means is the high income threshold is about $150,000 a year. And what the department is looking for is individuals that can command that salary. Now obviously as a graduate, that is not going to be a salary that you would be possibly commanding initially, but there is capacity for you to earn that much soon after. Internationally recognised and exceptionally talented means individuals who have a reputation in their field or an emerging reputation in their field if we're going into the graduate side of the house. So what we're looking for are people who have got, this can be internationally located individuals, they can be people who are already in Australia, people who have a distinguished record in their sector. They could be academics, they could be researchers, they could be innovators and creators. It really is a very wide net. If you are aligned with those 7 sectors and you can demonstrate through a peer support statement from somebody else in the industry who is eminent, you can actually be eligible for this visa. The other option is to have an Australian organisation endorse you, such as a university or an international university. It doesn't have to necessarily be Australian. It can be a scientific institute, it can be a government entity, it can be an individual with a history of eminence and distinguished research in a particular field, but basically we're looking for those individuals. However, it's not just people who are old and grey and who've come into their career and really blaze a trail. It can also be people who are completing a PhD or have completed a PhD in the last 3 years. It can be people who have completed a master or honours degree in the last 3 years, or have a grade point average of 80 plus. Now I do realise that not every institution across Australian universities uses 80 out of 100 as the benchmark, but we would ask the university to give us essentially a translation of what the GPA would be for the individual and if it would meet that requirement. So if you're an individual sitting in this room right now who is studying in one of the key 7 sectors, or has recently graduated from one of the key 7 sectors that I mentioned, and you're closely aligned with those sectors and you meet these requirements, you can actually be eligible for a permanent residency visa with citizenship after 3 years. And your family can come with you. So your children and your wife or your husband can actually be, or your spouse can be sponsored to come with you on this visa. It is a family unit a visa as well. So the other benefits of this visa is that all you need to do is seek the support of, whether it's the university or whether it's someone else in the community who is eminent or distinguished in their profession, and you don't need a formal employer sponsorship. There's no planning level restrictions, there's no occupationalist restrictions, there's no labour market testing, there's no levies, there's no age limit, and it's a functional level of English, so you don't actually need to sit any English tests. So what we're looking for is a very high calibre of individual, but the visa requirements are very minimal in this regard. We also provide a very quick turnaround in this visa category, so if people apply for this visa, we generally are getting, from application to grant, it's about a month, it's very quick. The way that the visa application process works is there's an expression of interest component. So if you're interested in applying for this visa or learning more about this visa, the website is there for you. And some of the handouts that I've given you have the details on the back as well. I do apologise if you didn't get a handout for those of you at the back, but it's all on our website. There's an expression of interest form. You can go through the expression of interest form, submit that form, and the departmental officers that are in charge of the processing of this visa will actually get back to you and tell you if you're eligible. If you're eligible, they will ask you to submit an application. So an application isn't required initially, it is at a later stage that we would ask you to submit that application. So it is a very exciting initiative, and it's one where we really encourage you, if you are interested in this visa pathway, we really strongly encourage you, or if you know people who may be eligible, to really talk to them and share with them this information. There is no, I guess you could say, limit in terms of what the department is looking for in terms of this program, because we have 5,000 places, and we're hoping to fill those places, but we want to see the applications coming through, the expressions of interest coming through. We're not going to turn people away if they are eligible. There's not going to be any hesitation from the department to grant the visa if people are eligible. The standard and the requirements are very high, the benchmark is very high. That is why we are turning these visas around very quickly, because the level of eminency and the level of talent we expect is pretty significant. So if you are a PhD, honours or master's graduate or soon to be graduate, please go on the website and have a look. It's a permanent residence visa. I mean, it's going to provide you with a very clear pathway to stay in Australia, and we want those people in those sectors to stay, because we do recognise that there is a need to grow those sectors in Australia. We want to develop those sectors. So I strongly encourage you to go through and have a look and see if it's something that you might want to apply for. So one of the things that I'll encourage you to all do as well is, if you want to know more about skilled migration visa pathways, we do have information on our website that is very easy to find. Our reputation for ease of use on our website has always been something we've been criticised for, so there has been a lot of streamlining and work put into making the website more user-friendly. So please go on there and have a look. There are options to break it down further in terms of visas for regional migration. If you want to have a look at the occupation list to see if your occupation is included on the regional occupation list, go into the skilled occupation list and you'll be able to see there by typing in your occupation or your future occupation what the visas look like in terms of what you're eligible for. The other thing I'll mention is, this is obviously something that employers use, but Vivo is a system that employers will use to check your ability and your rights to work in Australia. So please ensure that your visa details and your permission to work is all up to date and you're adhering to it. I know under a student visa it's limited, there's a limited capacity to do, obviously more than a set amount of hours. So please ensure that when you're applying for a job, you're very carefully checking what your visa requirements are. If you're not sure, you can actually go into Vivo and check yourself as well. So don't hesitate in doing that if you're unsure about how many hours you're able to work under your visa program. So that's it from me in terms of the presentation. I did have to condense it considerably considering the unfortunate circumstances around our location and time today. So the initial presentation I had prepared was longer, but I have kept it short and sweet so I can give you some Q&A time. So as mentioned earlier, I am not a migration agent. I will not be able to answer any questions specific to your circumstances.